No one will argue about the importance of wellness at work, and we all have opinions about how we might be able to improve it in our workplaces. The question is, do our opinions line up with the research and what really works? Stay with us and you will learn about this research, perhaps have some of your perspectives validated, but I'm guessing you will leave with new perspectives on this important topic. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference in their world, for their teams and organizations. If you are listening to this podcast, you could be joining us in the future for live episodes on your favorite social media platform. You can find out when those live episodes are taking place and therefore interact with us and, quite honestly, see them sooner. In this case, it would have been about 2 months sooner. And to do that, you can join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups, just two of the places where these are live streamed. And so to learn more about that and to get connected, just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn, and you'll be in the know and ready to go. Today's episode is brought to you by my latest book, Flexible Leadership, Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. It's time to realize that styles can get in our way and that following our strengths might not always be the best approach. In a world more complex and uncertain than ever, leaders need a new perspective and a set of tools that helps them create the great results their organizations and teams want and need. And that's what Flexible Leadership provides you. Learn more and order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/flexible. And with that, I'm going to bring in my guests. Yes, guests, not one, but two guests today. And let me introduce, if you're with me live, you can see their smiling faces. Let me introduce them to you, and then we'll dive in. First, Patricia Grabarek, PhD, is the co-founder, and they're nodding like I got it right, of Worker Being, and a seasoned industrial organizational psychologist specializing in workplace wellness, organizational culture, employee engagement, diversity and inclusion, and leadership development. With a background in both consulting and internal roles, Dr. Grabarek has led people analytics and talent management initiatives for over 60 organizations across many industries. Her work focuses on research-based strategies to improve well-being, retention, performance, and diversity efforts. Her insights have appeared in the the Los Angeles Times, CBS News, and CBC Radio. She has a PhD and a Master of Science in Industrial Organizational Psychology from Penn State. We are, I suppose, and a BA in Psychology from UCLA. Go Bruins. Katina Sawyer, PhD, is an industrial and organizational psychologist, co-founder with Patricia of Worker Being, and an associate professor of management and organizations at the University of Arizona's Eller College of Management. A leading expert in work-life balance, leadership, and positive workplace behaviors and diversity. She has published more than 50 peer-reviewed studies, book chapters, and articles in outlets like Harvard Business Review. Her work has been featured in major media like the Washington Post, Bloomberg Business Week, The Atlantic, and Forbes. And she has received grants from places like the National Science Foundation and SHRM. Together, and why they're both here, is that they've written this book together called Leading for Wellness, How to Create a Team Culture Where Everybody Thrives. Welcome to both of you. So glad that you're both here. And welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So excited to be here.
That's the first time. There's a member of my team, Patricia, that'll be very happy that I said we are. Because she is also
Penn
a
State.
Nittany Lion. Okay, so I want to ask this question. Katina was with me first, and so she said that the two of you have been friends for a long time, known each other for a long time, which is awesome. But I'm curious, sort of what's the journey that leads to the book? Like, sort of give me the backstory of how we end up with this lovely book.
Sure. I'll go ahead and get us started. So yes, Katina and I have been friends for a very long time. She's also a Penn State Nittany Lion. We met in grad school. How we got to the book, years ago, we were at a friend's wedding and over a few glasses of wine, we were talking about the challenges that organizations are having in really solving wellness, right? There are a lot of problems with retention and engagement and burnout. but no one was really
This
able
is
to
what you
figure out.
decided to talk about after 3 glasses of wine at the wedding. Like,
We
you
care
guys,
about it a
everybody,
lot,
these people
obviously.
are focused on their work. Just saying.
Clearly, we might be a little dorky, but we went to grad school together. This is stuff we love, right? So it's a very good point, though. We probably should have been talking about something a little bit more fun, but we were talking about this, and we ultimately decided that the research that talks about workplace wellness and how to really create good work environments was just not getting out there the way it should be. So the types of wellness solutions that were out there were not having the impact that people would hope they would have. And so we started with writing articles, and we have a podcast of our own where we talked about workplace wellness. But as we were diving into the research and really having these conversations, we're realizing there's almost too much out there, right? So not enough research was getting out into the world, but there's so much of it, and it wasn't in a cohesive, like truly usable fashion. So we decided to do some of our own research to figure out like what are the key drivers of thriving work environments. And ultimately we learned that leaders and the day-to-day experience with your leaders and your team are what impacts your well-being overall. So we went out to understand what really strong leaders that we call generators do well, and that led us to the book. So we created a framework, and we're lucky enough to get support from Wiley and publish it for all of you to read.
We'll come back to generators in a few minutes. But Katina, you write a book, and we've got the background, the backstory. It all started with 3 glasses of wine. But in all seriousness, my question for you, Katina, is like, what's the big idea? I mean, we sort of know now what the genesis of the book is, but I want people to leave not only with great insights from our conversation, but I hope they want to go buy the book. And so, what's the big idea of the book?
The big idea, I think, is that if you want to improve wellness at work, you need to start with leaders and stop relying on wellness programming and initiatives. That's the big idea. I think a lot of corporations have sort of outsourced their wellness initiatives or outsourced their focus on wellness to these programs or one-offs or add-ons, and sort of assume that if they have those, then wellness is taken care of. And in reality, in our research, we did not hear a lot about that.
The ping pong table and the toll-free number isn't enough? Is that what you're telling me?
Exactly.
Well, we will come back to that idea of generators in a second. But Patricia, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. The book's titled "Leading for Wellness," and in the introduction of you guys, I mentioned the phrase "workplace wellness," and I even used that in the intro. How would you, as one of the authors, define that? Like, what is workplace wellness?
Workplace wellness, I mean, there hasn't been a very strong definition for it until we worked on this for the book. We were like, we need to find out what people are actually meaning when they say workplace wellness. A lot of people are throwing that term around. So we asked people, in our studies, we asked folks, what do you mean by workplace wellness? And we learned as it's very individual, but there's a couple of key things that kept popping up: physical health, emotional health, mental health, and work-life balance. So people ultimately want to feel like they're thriving from a personal perspective. Physically, they're not overstressed, overworked, depressed, burnt out. And they want to feel like they're able to balance their work and their life in a way that's meaningful to them. Work-life balance, I think, also often carries a lot of connotations of like some equal perfect balance between work and life, like 50-50. That's not what it looks like. Every individual kind of has their own definition, right? And like maybe it changes throughout your lifetime as you go through different phases of your life. So it's really more about how you feel that you're in balance, and like you're getting what you need from your job and your work, and you're getting what you need from your personal life as well.
I wish, and this is maybe not my biggest wish, but one of my wishes is if I could go into the Wayback Machine, I would not have ever we would not be using the phrase workplace balance, because I think work-life balance, because I think exactly, Patricia, you got that right, that it somehow implies that there's a right answer, or that it's 50%, or that there's some magical place. And I don't think any of that's true, as you just said. So Katina, you've done all this research, and we're going to talk about some of it, and there's a lot of it in the book, obviously. As you talk to people now, as you're talking about the book or you're having conversations with folks, what is the thing that you're sharing that is perhaps the biggest surprise to people? Or same thing stated a different way. You said part of this already of how people are getting it wrong, but like, are there other ways they're getting it wrong, or what's the biggest surprise?
Yeah, I do think it's a surprise to people to learn that the wellness initiatives that they've been investing in may not be things that people are actually thinking about when they say that they, feel that their workplace wellness is supported. That does seem to be a surprise. I think something else that's a surprise is that people think about investing in leaders as an investment in their ability to grow their leadership skills from more of a task perspective and sometimes from an interpersonal perspective too. But they don't really think about leaders as being the core mechanism or lever for driving workplace wellness. And they don't realize that when they drive workplace wellness, it also helps them to achieve their leadership goals and results and productivity. So they often see these things as at odds. Well, if I want to make people happy and I want people to be, productive at the same time, well, I have to pick one. Or if I give people the opportunity to do something that's more life focused, it's taking away from their work as opposed to amplifying their ability to be productive at work. And I think that recognition or that light bulb moment that these actually go together and reinforce each other is something that people find somewhat surprising.
Patricia, it looks like you want to say something, add something to that.
No, I completely agree. I think there's just such an easy um, kind of way to silo workplace wellness as its own thing, which is why I think a lot of leaders put it on, HR's plate, the total rewards team's plate, because that's not my job. My job is to meet my goals, meet my results, make sure my team is doing what they need to be doing. But those two things really shouldn't be separated because your team is not going to do well. They're not going to do what they need to do. They're not going to have the results that you're hoping to drive if they're unwell, right? If you're imagine being exhausted or sick or completely at the very edge of burnout when you're at work, you're not doing a good job. So if you want your team to meet the results that you're going for, you need them to be doing well as well.
If any of us want to do our best work, we have to be at our best. Like, it's really as
Exactly.
straightforward as that, right? And so I think that's a really useful thing for us to think about. I was thinking a second ago as you guys were talking about one of the stories in the book, which I think everyone can relate to, is an organization realizes we've got some workplace wellness kinds of challenges, and so they create or purchase, it doesn't matter, a workshop, a in this case a virtual learning session for people to take action on and learn from, so they can have better workplace wellness. And people are overworked, and then they said, well, you have to take this 4-hour session, which just adds more
Yeah.
to the, I mean, I'm reading it and I'm thinking every person that reads this, or nearly every person that reads this, is going to have either a nervous laugh or a sort of sideways glance because they've experienced some version of that. And it's just a symptom of what you said, Katina, about why the bolt-on, add-on other thing probably isn't the whole solution. So Patricia, earlier you used the word generator, and that you say that both of you say that the leaders who are doing the stuff that Katina was just mentioning, you all call generators. So Patricia, so why that word? How does that different than being a leader? What do we need to be focusing on there to be a generator?
Great question. And generators, it's a term that we coined for these folks that are building those thriving environments. And why we use the word generators is because they're really generating energy. They're generating that thriving. They're creating a culture and an environment where people can do their best work, can feel, engaged, excited, great in their job, but also, again, being able to live that life outside of it. So they're generating all this positivity, this energy within their teams. And what makes them unique from just kind of leaders generally is they are actively focusing on a few key things that we talk through in the book on how to create those cultures. They're focusing on building trust with their teams. They're focusing on being authentic and vulnerable and sharing their challenges and struggles to create an environment that makes it safe for other people to speak up and talk to them about their challenges so you can work through it together. They will individualize the way they support people, right? So what one person needs to meet their, work-life balance ideals in their head is going to be very different than somebody else on the team. And being able to get to know folks is so critical to do that. And because they're building that trust and that vulnerability and that authenticity, they're able to really create solutions that are helpful for each person. They're creating a team where people are showing gratitude and positivity towards each other. They're helping each other out. So there's a lot of behaviors that we talk through that creates this environment that's more energizing than the opposite. And we actually also use the word extinguisher for kind of the opposite person. Again, extinguisher, because now they're extinguishing energy, right? They're kind of reducing the thriving on their team. Some people are doing that intentionally, some people are not. And sometimes it's just a busy environment and they don't take that time to get to know people. They don't take that time to really support individuals in the team. They're just hyper focused on results. And they're kind of, potentially bringing toxicity to the team. They're doing all the opposite behaviors where they are not creating a thriving environment. They're extinguishing people's engagement.
So one of the things that you said like 3 times in that description was you used the word authentic or authenticity. And, I've been in this business a long time, and I don't know, when I was your ages, that sounds sort of strange, but a long time ago, because I'm a lot older than you guys, a long time ago, that phrase didn't get used much. And now we use that phrase or that idea, authenticity a lot. And I think sometimes that we throw it around and everyone sort of nods and shakes their head. And yet in the back of their head, they're like, I don't really know what that means. Or does that mean I have to tell people, like, do I have to be a 100% open book? Like, so Katina, tell us a little bit, like, help us all operationalize that. Like, what is being authentic and what isn't it being? Because I think that one of the reasons people don't know where to go there is they don't really know really what it means to them personally on an actual application basis.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I think that's true of a lot of the, terms that we use throughout the book, even workplace wellness. That's why we set out like these are kind of what we call like blur words. They are in the vernacular, but they have these very vague and fuzzy meanings. And so two people can be talking about the same thing, but they're actually talking about different things because they're not defined, right? So I think this is a great question. And we
This
always
is my big takeaway, everybody.
Yeah.
The phrase blur words. Like
Yeah.
every episode, I always find there's one thing I'm never going to forget.
Yeah.
That's the one. I just got it, Katina.
Yay,
The blur
great.
word. Because it's
I'm so
exactly right.
happy.
It's exactly what they are. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. And I think authenticity is one of those, right? And so what we want to stress is that we are talking about being authentic within professional bounds, right? So there is always going to be some difference between how you are with your spouse at home or your friends and how you are in the workplace, right? That's just a professional bounds conversation. However, the core parts of who you are, your personality, the way that you approach interpersonal relationships, things of that nature, those sorts of things are things that are core to you and the way that you operate in the world. So if you feel like you're having to like bend and mold and shape yourself into something that you're not, or something that doesn't feel good to you, right, in the workplace, that's probably a sign that you're being inauthentic. So I'll give a more concrete example. So we often see leaders, and I saw a lot of these leaders coming up in my career as well, very kind of stoic, competitive, hardcore, more harsh type of leadership style. And let's say you've been exposed to those leaders for a long time. And as you grow in your leadership style, you're feeling like, for me, what I really like is to sit down and build relationships. Or before I like lay out a consequence, I like to ask a lot of questions about why this problem is happening or why this person is having a performance issue and create an open environment for conversation and things of that nature, right? But that's not what I've seen people do. So it seems like that's not what I'm supposed to do. Instead of continuing to just like mold yourself into this other thing, really thinking about, well, what makes me unique and different is actually a strength and maybe complementary to what other people are doing at the organizational level, right? So we all have different strengths that we bring to the table. And sometimes people think they have to be clones of other leaders they've seen, as opposed to acting in a way that's actually who they are, right? And so I think from an authenticity perspective, it doesn't have to be 100% authentic the same exact way that you would be with your best friend when you're hanging out But if you feel like you're taking core parts of yourself and changing them to fit a particular mold, and that's not feeling good to you, then that might be a sign that you need to share some more. And in the book, we give some tips about starting small in authenticity. So it doesn't need to be, from 0 to 100, but what are things that your family or friends would be surprised that people at work don't know about you? Right? That's like an interesting question, I think, to ask. And in the book, we share some stories about people who were extremely passionate about art and painting, for example, and no one in their workplace had any idea that they had that interest. And so even sharing something like that can give people a little window into who you are, and then they're willing to give you a little window into who they are too. And that helps to build those stronger, more trusting relationships.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree. I love that. Um, one of the phrases that you introduce, I believe it's your phrase. I'm attributing it as your phrase. Is the idea of leaders or generators needing to be boundary bouncers. And we're not talking about a bouncing ball. We're talking about that big guy outside of the
Yep.
bar. Patricia, what do you guys mean? So first of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your phrase, I think. And second of all, then what do you mean by what is a boundary bouncer and why do we need to be one?
Yes, definitely our phrase. Clearly we like to go to bars and stuff. We drink wine and talk
We
about
have
this,
a
right?
theme
So
here, everybody.
there's a theme. But for us, it was the visual, right? As a generator, you take this role as a boundary bouncer where you are not letting things past your employees' boundaries and also your own boundaries, right? You let your employees set boundaries. Like, let's say every Tuesday you have to leave work at 4:30 because you're coaching your kids like baseball team, right? That is a strict boundary for you. And what does your leader do as a boundary bouncer? They are stopping anything from coming in those VIP ropes during that time period, right? A meeting gets scheduled, they will say something, "Hey, we have to do it earlier." They'll take it if something needs to be taken, or they'll, ask somebody else on the team to help and support. They're going to do the things to try to remove those potential non-VIP guests from getting in past your boundaries and kind of ruining the balance that you're trying to achieve. They also they function this way not only for themselves but for their team, right? So that for themselves is also a really important piece, because you need to show that you are doing this for yourself so people feel like it's okay to actually have boundaries. So as a leader, going back to the authenticity, you need to be authentic about what kind of boundaries are important to you so that your team then also can help you in this endeavor, and make sure that your boundaries are supported so that you can kind of all create a culture where this is a norm and it's okay to say, hey, I have to step out at this time. I have to do this thing. And your leader will jump in and kind of make sure other leaders, other people are not trying to take over that boundary.
I don't know how we can have a real successful conversation about work-life balance without talking about boundaries, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I love that that you made this it's like a chapter in the book. To me, it's one of the highlights and really tangible, important things that we can do to lead for wellness, to use the title of the book. I was, as you were saying this thing about I got to leave by 4:30, it took me back to something from in my life long ago. I had clients in Houston, and at the time, all these folks were on van pools, and the van pools left at 4:15. Like the van pools left at 4:15. I had two observations. I noticed that the meetings ended by 4:15. Shocking. And guess what else? We still got the work done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Exactly.
that's a really important thing. Like that was an actual boundary,
Mm-hmm.
and yet and I reflect on it often with the client to say, listen, you know, why are your meetings that you start at 3:30 better than the ones you start at different times a day? Because you make sure you finish by 4:15.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Having a clear boundary makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Katina, you used the word individualized a few minutes ago. There's another section in the book about, you sort of, at least I take it as you basing it on, oh, a cat sighting.
That's what happens when you're alive, right?
um, that, that you at least base some of this thought on the work of Carl Rogers. And so if you want to hint at that, you can. But the idea of person-centered planning, it's this idea of I'm leading each of my folks individually, not just to some sort of norm. So do you want to talk a little bit about where that comes from and how, and mostly how that relates to this idea of us creating a workplace where everyone thrives?
Yeah. So it's actually kind of interesting because we sort of worked backwards into the Rogerian approach. We were trying to figure out in our data, we kept hearing this over and over again that leaders really took time to get to know their team members as individuals, not just in terms of their talents and skills, which they also wanted to know about and how they wanted to develop further from a work and job related perspective, but they also really wanted to know like what makes them tick, what motivates them, what do they have going on outside of their lives that's important to them? What are their non-negotiables? What are their values? They wanted to know them as people and take time to get to know them as people. And we kept hearing this over and over again, and that leaders were taking dedicated time to actually sit down with their team members and have conversations that were not work related, but were more related to who they were as human beings. I actually had a conversation yesterday with a very close friend and colleague of mine who onboarded in an organization. And part of the onboarding process was that they sat down with her and asked her about her values and asked her about what was important to her outside of work and what are things that she didn't want to compromise. And she was so impressed and so excited and so happy that that was part of her onboarding process. And this is the sort of thing we kept hearing, right? That this was really important. So when we were thinking about how to frame this and whether or not this had been talked about in other places, we realized that this is actually a common methodology that's used in other settings where people are forming individualized plans to help people get to the core of who they are and to create life plans that actually align with who they are at their center. But we can do that at work too. And that's where we got the person-centered planning idea from, and backing into this Rogerian approach was that that's really what these leaders are doing. They're doing something that's almost therapeutic for their team and helping them to move forward and make plans that don't just take into account what they can do from a work perspective, but what they want to do and whether it aligns with the path that they want to be on in a more holistic sense.
Yeah. So I just want to make an observation for everyone who's listening. If you were listening to what Katina was just saying, I think it's a really important point. Some of you listening are saying, I want to have those individualized conversations. I want to get to know my folks. That's naturally what I do, but we have work to do. And some of you are saying, listen, I don't have time to do that. Like, that's not that. This is business. Like, that's not. Yeah, that's nice, but only if we get lucky. Like, and my point to all of you is, whichever sort of where your mind, like where your natural inclinations are about this, is that what Katina and Patricia are telling you is it's part of the job. It's not a nice to have.
Mhm.
It's not a if you have a chance to. And even though it may end up being therapeutic, you don't have to have stayed at Holiday Inn Express last night to do
Mhm.
it. The point is that it's part of the job. And
Mhm.
and generators, I think I'm safe in saying, and the generators that you're describing see it as part of the job.
Mhm. And
Mhm.
I'll add one more thing to that is that it actually makes your job easier and helps you solve work related problems better. So there's a story in the book where a person was really struggling in their performance. And someone who we interviewed was witnessing this person really struggling in their performance. And the leader actually took time to figure out what was going on with this person. And because they had this extra knowledge, et cetera, of this person's personal life, knew that this person was going through a really terrible breakup. And so recognized that this was a period of time where this person was struggling with something outside of work that might have been impacting their performance inside of work, and could have made a very rash decision to let this person go or decide or judge this person and sort of label them as a low performer. But instead, they understood the more complex picture of what was going on with this person, helped them to get through that time period, and they became a stellar, like high potential, high performer person once they got through this rough patch.
Uh, Exhibiting and offering grace to people contextually is not the same as excusing something for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yes.
acknowledging the individual nature of the situation, right? I think that's 100% right. Patricia, it looks like you want to say something, and after you do that, I'm gonna roll us into some final thinking.
No, I completely agree with everything Katina said and the story that she was sharing. I think it's an important note too that as you get to know all of your employees and you create like a team culture around this, that also helps you have a group of people that are supporting each other. So when this person is going through that really bad breakup or they're sick or they're whatever, other people are willing to step in and step up because they are now part of this community that is willing to help. And that will help you reach those goals and help kind of compensate for some of those potential performance issues or challenges as people are going through difficult things. And then, if the person that was helping now goes through something difficult, they have support too. So it kind of creates this balance on the team where you're getting to those broader goals together, and you don't have to feel like one person having a hard time is going to derail everything. You can all step up and help each other out.
Patricia has just described the subtitle of the book, A Team Culture Where Everyone Thrives, which is a good chance for me to segue into to the last segment of our conversation. And so I'm going to shift us out of the work and your work just a little bit. And I'll start with you, Katina. Like, what do you do for fun?
That's a very good question. So I think travel is probably one of my favorite things. I just got back from a long, really nice trip that was like part work and part vacation in Europe. So I love seeing new places, doing new things. I also feel like I like to find like hidden gems of places. So like, what's like the like cool spot? Like, what's the cool museum? What's the cool restaurant? What's the cool little coffee shop? Like, I like to kind of do a lot of research and plan in that direction. And then also, I just like to sit outside with friends and have conversations. I like socializing a lot. I'm a very social person. So I think like hanging out with friends and having conversations is also something that really makes me happy.
Patricia, what do you do for fun?
My goodness, we're gonna sound like twins. The travel thing is definitely mine as well. Love traveling, and I love planning the travel, just like Katina said, doing all the research, figuring out all the little nooks and crannies of places to go, and the food for each region that I'm going to. So I really spent a lot of time on understanding kind of the food culture too. Um, Love travel. If I could just travel all the time, that would be my favorite thing.
We're good travel
Other,
buddies because
yeah,
we like the same stuff. So that's good.
yeah, works out perfectly. Other than that, I mean, I have a house full of animals. I love pets. I have a dog, 2 cats, as we saw one of them. Um, so spending time with them. I've also been really into Pilates lately. That's been I love that because when you're on a reformer, you can't really be doing work or thinking about work because you're thinking about what you're doing in that moment. So like being in a class setting for a physical activity, I think is very helpful for me. And I really enjoy that.
So, Patricia, while you're talking, the one thing you knew I was going to ask you is, what are you reading?
So it's been taking me a while because I've been quite busy, but I've been reading Outraged by Kurt Gray. That is a really interesting book that's all about like how to find common ground with people that maybe have different um, perspectives on you. So like how, for example, in like a political setting, you may have the same general morals as like your parents, but you're politically different, right? So how do we get through that? How do we understand that better? That's what the book's about, and I've been enjoying it as I have time.
Katina, what about you? What are you reading?
Yeah, I've actually been reading a lot of journal articles and books on trauma informed contexts for helping to support healing for people who have experienced really extreme adverse life events. I'm currently writing a paper on that topic and very heavily immersed in that and trying to understand how we can better connect trauma and trauma related conversations. And there's a great book that's going to be forthcoming by Jane Chen that's going to be great on that topic. And how can we really address trauma and traumatizing experiences that people have had in their past, both at work and in society at large?
So before we go, one of you can decide. I mean, you built this company together called Worker Being. Like where can we learn more about that? Where do you want to point people related to the book, et cetera? One of you tell us a little bit about that, how we can connect with you guys.
Sure. Yeah. Workerbeing.com is a great place to start. You'll get all the details about us. If you go to workerbeing.com/book, you'll find links to all the different places you can find our book, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc. Yes, our beautiful cover that Wiley designed. And you can always email us as well if you have questions or you want to talk about the book or you're interested in bringing us in. It's contact@workerbeing.com. And we're both pretty active on LinkedIn. So find us there too.
We will have the links to the books and to workerbeing.com in the show notes. But if you're just listening and you're not going to go to the show notes, it's work-r being, being.com. workerbeing.com, workerbeing.com. So before I say goodbye to my guests, I've got a question for all of you. It's a question I ask you every single episode. It's an incredibly important question, because if you don't answer this question, the value that you get from this time that you just invested is far less. So the question is, now what? What action will you take as a result of what you've learned? You've got new ideas, insights, perspectives. What are you going to do? What can you do today to become more of a generator, for example? Or maybe the thing you're going to do is you're going to order a copy of the book. But fundamentally, what are the ideas that you got here that you will turn from idea to implementation? Because until you do that, the value of the time we just spent, while entertaining, is definitely limited. So thank both of you for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. Since I read the book, I've been looking forward to our conversation, and it didn't disappoint. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
so
us.
much.
And so everybody, if it didn't disappoint you, I hope you'll tell somebody else about it. But make sure, whatever you do, make sure that you are subscribed wherever you're watching or listening, so you don't miss any future episodes of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.